What is going to happen to the market for cardboard when the economy crashes? What will happen to the poor players who buy packs of cards to play the game and enjoy the game? What's going to happen to the collectors, the valiant hoarders of cardboard, but they have no intention to resell? They are collecting because they're collectors. And then what's going to happen to the evil, dirty, evil investors, the people who buy products with the sole intention to one day resell? What will happen to these people if the market, well, the economy, the entire economy crashes? Absolutely nothing. And we're going to go over why, the macroeconomics of it all. But first, hi, my name's Nick. I run this channel. I run a company called Capital Catalyst. We sold 6 figures in cardboard last year, which might not be a lot for some, but it's a lot for me. And I'm very happy to be here to talk with you about what is going on. Today, we've got a Sharpie video, and I cannot be more stoked to share with you some details about macroeconomics and why nothing happens, why nothing will happen when there's a crash. There's people who are hoping that there will be, a bunch of cards for super cheap, right? So that's the hope. The hope and the goal is that you'll be able to buy revised dual lands for $100 each because, the U.S. economy or wherever you live, that economy is going to crash, and then people will be poor and desperate, and they will sell their cards for super cheap amounts. And I will explain to you now why, from a macroeconomic basic theory sense, that isn't true. Excuse my strange positioning on the video and stuff. This is trying something new today. But we've got some paper. I've got a Sharpie, and we are going to run over some general macroeconomics. The economy is a pie. It is a circle. Could be a worse circle. Not that good. Not that bad. The economy is a circle, and the economy represents all productive assets. And one way you can think about this is money, but money is not actually a productive asset because money doesn't do anything. Money doesn't make anything. Money doesn't provide any services to your lives. Money is just money, and you can print money, you can burn money, you can take money out of the economy and put it in. The economy really is made up of all of the productive assets. So this is the people. These are the machines. These are, if we're talking about Wizards of the Coast, their productive assets are their employees, their factories, and I guess that's it. Maybe the cell phone that Mark Rosewater uses to record his Drive to Work podcast. That's all part of the productive assets that Wizards of the Coast has. And the economy is made up of productive assets. And in a way, they're represented by money, right? Because all the factories that Wizards of the Coast have, all of the phones that Mark Rosewater's used to record podcasts on, those can all be bought with money, but it's not the same thing as money. And so that's just like a side note. But we got the economy here. And so the question is, how much of the economy goes towards what kind of things? And I'm actually going to look this up. Macroeconomics. It's like, Nick, you should know this off the top of your head. Well, maybe it's changed, man. It's been a few years since I've looked at this. Macroeconomics, percent of economy. I'm looking for the pie chart. It was the first thing that came up. I guess I should share my screen. Nope. Yep. There it is. That's the pie chart I was looking for. So now I'm going to actually draw it on my desk. All right, so first off, the vast majority of the economy, it is about 2/3. Slice. This chunk here on the right side of the screen is called consumption. I'm going to call it C. C for consumption. Consumer purchasing. My handwriting, by the way, is awful. So is my spelling, apparently. Drawing consumption with an N. It is with an N. What am I doing? Consumption. Be sure to make fun of my handwriting in the comment section below. Consumption. Now so that's about 68% of the economy. Then we get 16% of the economy, which I guess is going to be like that, is investment. We'll call that an I. investment, and I'll get into what these mean. And I'm going to tie this all back to magic, I promise. But, sometimes we got to learn about not magic to learn about magic, sometimes. Then there's another 17%. God bless America. This will change for every... Oh, wow. Anyway, you'll just have to bear with me. Is government spending. G-O-V. And then there's this slice here. I'm just going to kind of color it in, and we're going to ignore it, but we're going to call it net exports, and we're not going to talk about it much. No, there's some fancy symbol they use in the colleges. I don't remember it. Any for net exports. And we're just going to ignore that. And it should be smaller. If I drew my chart right, it would be a smaller slice than it is. Okay. So what goes under consumption? Under consumption includes all purchases related to Magic the Gathering. This also includes all food. This also includes everything you need to live. Yes. So that's the reason why consumption is such a large part of the economy. But essentially, every stock is a company that sells stuff that deals with consumption, right? And I guess, there's a lot of companies that sell stuff to the government. And so, buying company stock is, in a way, investment. But we're going to get to all those parts. But in general, the companies, that we see, the Hasbros, the Coca-Colas, not the Raytheons, that's kind of government, but most of the companies we see and think about are consumption. Investment describes money that goes towards building businesses. That's not the way an econ professor would describe it, but I think a way to conceptualize investment is, what is the money that is going toward as a productive resource into the economy that's going to grow the economy more in the future? What's the money that's going towards research, that's going towards R&D, that's going towards development? What are all the productive resources in the economy, and in many ways the money, even though it's not quite money, but it's what's the money that's going in the economy towards investing in the future? And so what does this include? This includes savings. So if you have savings, like a savings account, and you keep money in there, that money is being used by the bank, being loaned out and loaned out and loaned out. There's some cool equations where you can see how much, if you store $100 in the bank, odds are it's turning into $1,000 because they're keeping 10% of that, and that 90, 80, 70, 60. Anyway. So there's all this money that's being saved by you and me, but it's being used by the banks to give out as loans. And those loans may be going towards startup companies. That's investment. That is money being used, productive assets being used to grow the economy in the future. Not all investments pay out. Not all startups do cool things. But when you think about how did we get cool stuff, some of it comes from the government, things like GPS or internet. But a lot of the things, like the Google searches or the AIs, that's controversial, but AI is a cool thing. The Magic the Gatherings, the trading cards, all these, for the most part, required some kind of investment, some kind of capital to help it grow. Even Hasbro today has stock that it sells, and it helps them have money to invest into their future and to, in theory, hire more designers that can figure out really cool ways to turn pizzas into food artifacts for the Ninja Mutant Turtle set. So investment includes your savings. It includes investor money. Investor money. So if you are an investor and you say, I have $1 million and I don't know what to do with it, I'm going to invest it. That is part of investment. And I think you get the gist. That's investment. Not the biggest part of the economy, but an important part of the economy. Now for the government. The government's pretty self-explanatory. The government is the government. So this includes, pardon me, this includes all military spend, other programs that are benefit people, things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and everything else is actually a very small piece. So, we can freak out and say like, oh my gosh, we overspend on this program, or wow, we were giving even like controversial things like, oh, those schools, the daycares that we're just giving money to, that is like so atrocious. Yes, it is. And guess what? If we cut all of that fraud and all that waste, we would still have a huge deficit because of just military, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. That is the real government spending. And so it's interesting, right? Because you go to people, and sorry, I'm talking about the United States right now, and this is just a little bit of rant. I promise this is getting to magic, but it's just interesting because talking about critical thinking, which is also an important part of this channel, is that if you're like, my government spends too much money, almost everybody agrees on that. Like you poll people, everyone's like, yes, my government spends too much money. And then you ask them what we should cut, right? When you're like, should we cut the military? No. Should we cut Social Security or government handout programs, pension programs for adults? I know different countries do different things, but the programs that you do for retirees, people are like, no. Should we cut healthcare for people? No. Then so it's like, what should we cut? Anyways, all right, little rants over. So this is the economy. This is the slices and the chunks of the economy. There's exports. We import and export things. That is dollars or productive assets that leave the country or enter the country. But we're not going to talk about that. Okay. So what happens? The question is, what happens in a recession? Because this gets to the key of what is, how does a recession impact the actual collectors, investors, players in Magic the Gathering. And what happens in a recession is that people cut investment. And so I guess I'll just do like a line through it. People cut investment. They cut their savings. They cut investing money into companies. Banks get more tight. They're not as likely to give out loans. Investors are looking for safer places to put their capital. So when there's a recession, investment goes down in a measurable, real way. You know what doesn't go down? Consumption. This is fascinating. But macroeconomists find that in a recession, even to some degree, people have to eat, people have to live, and people do continue living, and they do continue spending. Spending may change, right? What people are prioritizing and spending money on, but in general, consumption stays flat through a recession. And then what does government spending do? Well, government does whatever the government wants. Usually the government spending will increase. And then if you're like a Keynesian, then you're like, oh, government should increase to make up for the chunk of the pie that investment isn't doing. And that will keep the economy whole or whatever. Anyways, what happens though, this is the other side, critical thinking, important tangent, is that if government spending increases, and in fact, to the degree government spending is increased, it crowds out or takes up space that otherwise would be used for investment. And the mechanism for this is through government bonds. So when investors go to the market and they say, I have $100 million and I want to make 4% a year, what's a good, safe way to do that? The US government is there and is like, just give us your money and we will guarantee you 4% in a year or 5 years or whatever. And investors are like, sweet, this is great, deal. Now imagine if that opportunity didn't exist. If investors had $100 million and they said, hey, I want to invest my money, I want to grow it over time. And the US government was like, our budget's balanced, we don't need your money. Investors would have to go somewhere else. Investors would actually have to invest in a company or something that could grow the economy in a sustainable way. And, maybe we should be communists and maybe the government should own everything. Sure. But if you think that growing the economy through companies and innovation and, growing opportunities by helping there be more money to invest in individuals who have great ideas and want to build a company with the help of some kind of outside financing, then government spending is crowding that out right now. Right. Okay. Okay. So how does this deal with magic? Well, so I already said it. Consumption is flat. If consumption is flat, then there isn't going to be any decrease in the general spending on things that people use to live. But Nick, people don't use Magic the Gathering to live. Why do you think that in a recession, people aren't going to spend less money on Magic the Gathering? Well, okay. First off, they could. It is totally reasonable to say, I think that this one vertical or this one area is going to experience a recession harder than these other areas, right? And I mean, we're seeing this now. We are seeing a rise in people buying, it's not clear exactly that we're in a recession right now, but we're seeing a rise in people buying things like secondhand goods. And we're seeing a weakening of certain kind of like main brands, kind of like top line type stuff, right? And so that's an example of something that can happen. But in general, recreation, things like movies, movie-going during the Great Recession, which was 2008, 2009, kind of, movies did great. Movies did really great. People need their recreation through stressful times. And what is better recreation than Magic the Gathering? Answer me this. Riddle me this, So, you could have a thesis that says like, no, I think Magic's actually going to go down, but I don't see it. I don't see a world where people who use Magic is their fun and their play and their investing in their whatevering, collecting. And then a recession comes and they're like, oh yeah, just kidding. I'm not into those things anymore. Because if they're into them, they're going to spend money on them, whether they have it or not. That's the way the beautiful first world economies go. Right. So what's the point? I've told you this macroeconomic story, this broad theory and theses that accumulate to this reality, which is that Magic the Gathering cards like the Mox Diamonds and the Polluted Deltas and the Underground Seas, these Magic cards are not going to crash in price just because the economy is crashing. In order for that to happen, demand would have to go down. And just because there's a recession does not mean that demand for recreation goes down. That's the point. Demand for recreation does not go down in a recession, and therefore it is not obvious to me, and I certainly don't see any clear reason to think that Magic prices, card prices are going to go down because there's a general recession. Now, what if it wasn't a general recession? What if it's just Magic the Gathering? What if it comes out that, heaven forbid, but let's say, because we know that Logan Paul is like opening Yu-Gi-Oh cards now, but let's say, heaven forbid, that Logan Paul announces that he has no intention to ever open Magic the Gathering. How devastating. What we know would obviously happen from that is a decrease in demand. So I've shown this before, but this is going to be our supply-demand curve. We have a quantity demanded on the x-axis and a price on the y-axis. And supply is an upward sloping curve like this, because as the price goes up, as Wizards of the Coast knows there's more money to be made, as Wizards of the Coast finds a set like Final Fantasy and they know that there's lots of money out there wanting Final Fantasy, they produce more booster boxes. And that is the relationship of supply. You could argue that supply is actually just an up and down curve, because Wizards of the Coast is monopoly and they just choose the quantity. They produce it, which is fair. I think that would be a fine way to draw it, but I'm going to draw it this way because it's more natural in a natural economy instead of a monopoly. Anyways, so now demand, which this is going to be demand 1. This is our normal demand. This is before the tragic announcement that Logan Paul is not going to ever get into Magic. So this is D1 and this is supply. So what happens when D1 goes to D2 and demand shifts down? So to be clear, I'm joking about Logan Paul. That would not decrease demand. But you can imagine things that could decrease demand. Well, you could imagine Wizards of the Coast makes a bunch of really bad sets in a row. Wizards of the Coast publishes a Magic 30th type event. That was a demand going down kind of event. There's things Wizards of the Coast could do that would lower demand. There's things that could happen culturally that could lower demand. Honestly, can't think of a lot of them, but it could happen. If demand went down, which my joking example is that Logan Paul announces that he's never going to open up Magic the Gathering and then people will be crushed. If demand goes down, two things will go down. The quantity, and it's not just the quantity produced, but the quantity demanded will go down. People will be less likely to want to open or buy stuff, and the price of things will go down. And there's your ticket. If you're looking for underground seas to drop in price, you better hope and pray that something happens like a Magic 30 type event, because that, a decrease in demand for Magic the Gathering, would result in lower prices. That is what you want to see, is a decrease in demand for Magic the Gathering. It can't just be like a supply shock. It can't be, like what happens if supply goes up? Well, supply goes up, price can go down, but with these reserve list staples, that's not really a thing. So you better hope for card prices go down, that they either get reprinted or that there's some kind of Magic 30th type event that results in supply going down. Or sorry, not supply, but demand shifting backwards. Excuse me. So that's it. That's what would have to happen to crash the Magic the Gathering market, is that something would have to happen, an event like Magic 30 that would lower demand. Good times, y'all. Let me know if you enjoy this kind of thing, or if you don't enjoy this kind of thing, let me know. Because, I'm having a good time. And hey, thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, I would invite you to consider subscribing. We are so close to 400 subscribers. Then we're close-ish to 500 subscribers, and that would just be the dream, because in the world of Magic the Gathering YouTube, unless you are a really funny group that does Commander stuff together, once you have 1,000 subscribers, you've kind of made it, and I'm hoping to make it. So thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your day.